Welcome back to Shabby Shack Studio. I'm showing a sweet watercolor sunset over the water today that I created for the cover page of my March Bujo. I promise that this will be super easy, just you and me having a little dabble together as the sun comes up in the studio. The words on the front of the beautiful candle you see in the top left hand corner really do ring true today, as you'll soon see that I am actually creating this in my beautiful linen pajama shirt with my very messy hair that you'll see peeping out constantly as much as I kept editing it out on this video, with my early morning coffee and my favorite watercolor book. Okay, so I'm starting off with just a really light pencil sketch. This is actually just a guide for me, just for placement, just so that I can picture where my sun, and I want to leave room for the rays of the sun and before I start to paint in the waves. So it's very, very faint because the peach that I'm planning to use for the sun and for the rays of the sun, I don't want that pencil line to be visible underneath that. So if it was a darker color, it wouldn't be such a big issue, but because I'm actually going to be working with really soft washes, I want it to be really gentle with that pencil. You have the option, of course, to erase it, but I wanted this sun to have a nice rounded half semicircular shape. So I wanted to make sure that that shape was nice and I was happy with placement first. Again, you can erase it or you can just go straight in, dive in without it, whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay, so I'm actually working on with my palette. You can see that just a little bit there peeping out on the right, and that's because, as I mentioned, I was painting first thing in the morning in the studio. You'll see that kind of the shadows and the light change as I'm painting, as the sun's actually coming up in the morning. So, and I did actually edit out my messy hair as much as possible, but I will warn you right now that you will see lots of my head kind of popping in and out. The best I could edit it out, I did, and I'll try to be more careful in future, but it's all a learning curve and placement of video and all of those things at the moment, and I was very relaxed and just enjoying this moment to just be painting and sharing that with you. So I wasn't thinking of trying so hard and being stressed about being video, and I was just having fun, and I want you to do the same. So hopefully you'll forgive my straight hairs peeping in and out, and have some fun with me today. So as you can see, I popped in my my little sunset, and the colors that I use, I actually already had that pre-mixed, as you can see there on my palette on the right. But if you're mixing something up, just lots and lots of water, and I use the quinacridone rose and just a little bit of maybe yellow ochre to make that color, and lots of white, so it's very opaque, very translucent, and I'm going to go back and add in some wet on wet and some wet on dry, so don't worry about that. Now I'm actually just mixing up some blues. Found this fabulous little ceramic palette when I was out wandering around. I think this one was from H&M. I will find it if possible and link it for you below. I actually just thought it would be really lovely because I like the big deep dishes in it, to actually be using when I'm painting, and I already had it all set up, so it was very easy for me just to jump in, and I wanted to mix up quite a lot of blue, and then I'm going to use lots and lots of different shades. So this one in particular is just the cerulean blue with, as you saw, lots and lots of water. If you're setting up to paint with me still, make sure you have at least 1 glass of fresh water. 2 is quite popular too. It gives you a little bit more flexibility when you're rinsing your brush off a lot. You can see me picking that very watered down cerulean blue up there. I wanted to make sure that I've got a lot of different blues and greens, so I'll mix them. You can see my head peeping and I laugh. So I use a little bit of the Viridian green, which has just a beautiful color in that, and so I do actually just use that very basic mix of the cerulean blue. I do use a cobalt blue, and I use the Viridian green for the most part, and then I just kind of use varying mixes for this. So it's not a lot of colors, it's really very simple. I want you to just play with it and see how you feel about your colors. So just play with it, just remembering when it dries, it will dry substantially lighter, so we will be going back in and I'm painting this mostly in real time. I've sped it up a little bit in places, but only a tiny bit, so you don't see my kind of hesitation. It's not that I'm rushing through it, so I want to make sure that we get to enjoy this together. As you can see, I'm just very light brush strokes. I'm really feeling my way. It was a really relaxed morning spent in the studio, a little bit of a treat for myself to start so early. I wasn't sleeping well, so quite often I get up and go and make the best of the day and treat myself to some time with my favorite watercolor paper and my favorite watercolors. As you can see, light a candle and just have a moment to just sit over a cuppa, sometimes a favorite show, and just relax. So you can actually see me here adding in quite a concentration of the cobalt blue. This again is completely up to you, just feel your way through. I wanted to just have a little bit more impact as it's starting to dry there. You can actually see it start to pick up into the sun, which was actually a mistake. So I just dried my brush off on some paper towel. Always keep lots of paper towel handy. And then you can actually see I dried off the brush, cleaned it off and dried it, added a little bit of water and picked up a lot of the blue. But I still felt that it was going to keep bleeding in, and I want the sunset to reflect on the water, not the water to reflect on the sun. So I actually just picked up a fresh piece of paper towel. I purposely keep this in because it's more important that I'm present, not perfect. So I don't want you to think that when I'm painting and then when you're painting you're thinking, well, she doesn't make mistakes. Yes, she does. Sometimes that something's not dried as much as you think it has, and then the colors will bleed and you don't want them to. So you can see that I am being quite cautious to leave a little bit of a gap in between my waves. It actually creates a really beautiful ripple, a really beautiful effect. This is not meant to be, you know, a painting that's so much created by a professional. That's something that is unattainable. This is just fun. This is fun. It can be done by somebody who is a professional if they want to practice or play. They want something that's a little bit more abstract. It can be painted by an absolute beginner and with an assurance that at the end you could actually frame this. It would look great with a mat around it and a lovely frame, especially in something like a timber frame I could picture, and hung on the wall. It would be a beautiful piece to put on. You could even gift it or turn it into a card or whatever your heart desires. The gift of your time and passion is always a lovely gift for someone that you love. So as you can see, I'm just picking up different shades of the blue, different shades of the green. I'm very gently feeling my way. I've gone back and added a bit more blue in there now that I know my sun has actually dried and it's not going to bleed together. Don't worry about that little bit where I blotted it. I'm actually going to come back and add a little bit of depth to the sun later on, so don't stress about that. You can see there I've added a fair bit of the cobalt blue and then I've just dried off my brush and I've just blended that in. Have a play. This is not meant to be something that's going to make you feel stressed or anxious. This is watercolors and being creative, and painting should be something that comes from a joyful place. It shouldn't be something that you feel that you can't do because you don't have expensive tools, or you don't have years of practice, or you haven't paid for expensive classes that you may not necessarily be able to afford. I want you to realize that being creative is something that comes from the heart. It's something that we all can do and should do if our heart calls us to do it. And you don't need to have expensive tools. So if you've seen any of my other videos, you will see that this brush was actually picked up at a market stall. It is actually a size 10. It's a pointed round brush. I love it because it takes me back to that holiday with my family. I don't love it because it was expensive. It isn't fur, it's acrylic. It makes me think of the holiday where I found it and just thought, you know what, I'm in Barcelona and I'm wandering around this beautiful vintage market and I like to paint and they have brushes and I want one. It was literally, that was the only thought that went into this. It has a timber handle, it has a sweet little brass cap there holding my bristles. It keeps this beautiful shape. I use it and use it and use it. It has a tiny fine tip, so I can do everything with it. It has a big fat belly that holds lots of paint. So I don't have to keep going back as often to pick it up, whereas I would with something finer, which might drive me a bit crazy. I have lots of brushes. I keep going back to this one. So again, I've gone back and I've picked up a little bit more of that coral, and I'm just dabbing that into the sea at the top there, because let's face it, when the sun sets, that beautiful sun reflects on the water. And how often have you looked at the sunset and thought, if I painted this, it wouldn't look real? So this is your opportunity. We're not going for real. We're not going for pleasing anyone else but ourselves. So you can see me spending quite a little bit of time just getting those shapes right. I'm going to go back in later, wet on dry, and I'm going to blend and add a bit more. You can see changing the shape of the waves as I go. That the shape isn't 100% smooth. It's not 100% filled in. There's little white gaps and odd shapes, and you know what? That's exactly how Mother Nature is. She's perfectly imperfect in every way. And honestly, if you sat and looked at the water, if you're anything like me, I just think, how would I paint that to make it look 100% real? It fascinates me. And the more I paint, the more I seem to look at the composition of everything around me and think, how in heaven's name would I paint that? So this is my interpretation of it. So yours may be different, and that's good too. So if you wanted to do it as one block color and blend it together, go nuts. If you want to do it as a wash and let that dry and then go back with darker colors or just layers over the top, continue to do it. Do you? I would love to see anything that you create. If I inspired you to do it, to link me, I would love to see that. It will make my heart so happy. I am actually a professional university teacher as well. So for me, I love to see if I've inspired my students to believe in themselves. So don't be afraid to do that. You can find me, all the links are below this video, so you can definitely find all my socials without any trouble. I'd love to hear what you would like to see more of as well below, so don't forget to do that. And do please hit subscribe if you'd like to support me and this channel, and it gives me with more time to keep doing what I love and sharing that with you. So okay, so back onto our waves. You can see me now that they're starting to dry a little bit more. I'm going back in there with a little bit more depth on the color, just because as they're drying, they do wash out. These are good quality paints. These are my Royal Talons Van Gogh. They are a professional series paint that my daughter and my beautiful husband gifted me for Christmas this year, or last year, end of last year. So that was 2021. Previous to that, I was actually using very inexpensive student quality paints, and you can see lots and lots of videos done with those paints, including here on YouTube, and heaps on my IGTV as well. So, and I'm saying cheap, I'm saying like $15 for the palette. So inexpensive. And again, you can follow me on my blog as well, and on my website, and there's lots and lots of stills of everything I've done and close-ups, and a lot of that is actually the student quality paints, because that's what I had beforehand. I literally painted until I was running out of the colors, and that's when I thought, you know what, I think it's time to switch over, and it's time to spoil myself a little bit. And it was my Christmas present, as I said, from my loves. So again, you don't need to have expensive tools in order to do this. Like I said, it was the beautiful little dish at the top was a H&M piece. I think it was $10 on sale. I just thought it was beautiful. The brush, inexpensive, from a market stall. This paper, I'll link everything below. The paper is actually Mont, and one of my absolute faves. I love the texture of their papers. You can see here now that my sun has dried, I actually picked up quite a lot of the rose. It's quite concentrated, and as you can see already, because I was editing this video as I went to take my head out of, as much as possible, out of view, that pink looked really vibrant, but after it's actually on the page for a moment and begins to bloom and bleed, and it's doing its thing, you can see that that pink actually diluted, and the color just blended to this beautiful, beautiful coral in no time at all. So it didn't stay that hot pink. I know from experience that it wouldn't, but don't be afraid to try and add in a bit of that color and practice adding in some stronger colors than normally they look like in the actual palette themselves. Okay, that concentrate is not how it's going to stay. So be brave, and the more you do it, the more you get to know your paints and what they will actually do on paper. If you didn't like it, you could always wet your brush and then go and actually remove some of that color later. So don't stress, it's always possible to go and fix that. So don't worry about that, be brave. Okay, so I'm just going back here, adding in a bit of depth here on the water, having a little bit of a play, getting near the end here. So I'm actually going to come and I'm going to add the rays in of the light. Again, it's going to be a little bit abstract. It's not going to be exact and perfect and something that may look 100% real. As you can see, the greens here in the sea, although the waves and the sea, let's face it, depending on the day and the reflection and even the location, it can be quite green or quite blue. So but the color will die down too as it dries. So be brave with your color. So I'm getting to the point where we're actually going to move on and do the rays in just a moment. There you can see again the colors have touched and started to bleed where I didn't want them to be. I wanted to keep that little white space in between, so I gave it a little dab with always have some clean paper towel that you're not dabbing your brush on. Just keep a piece handy in case. Okay, so here you can see I'm just mixing up some of the rose, diluting it with a whole lot of water. I already have some ochre, as you can see, next to it mixed up. Adding a whole lot of water to that as well, and I'm actually just painting in the rays. I actually had my head in for so much of this that I edited out quite strictly when it came to showing you. Okay, so last up, I've actually just gone back in now that it's all dried, and I'm going in with some wet on dry to add a little bit of extra color and a little bit of extra oomph, a bit of extra punch and to the piece. And I'm just adding in just wherever I feel it. So you can see this is not broad strokes or a fancy brush. It is literally just feeling my way where I feel that it could do with an extra brush stroke or a little bit of extra color. Wanted to keep that beautiful reflection of the sun on the water, so I don't want it to be too heavy. But you can see the colors dried a little bit flat, so I wanted to come back in and give them a little bit of extra punch before I was done. Okay, so once again, if you like what you see and you would like to see more of it, please hit subscribe and support the channel and me. Again, I will link everything for you below, including the website of Marley and Locker. The potter is Ness. That's who created this beautiful vessel that has my candle in it. It's actually a mug, a coffee mug. But I've moved house recently and cannot find for the life of me yet in all the boxes my candles, my candle holders. So I grabbed one of my favorite mugs and popped a candle in that. So I will link that for you below too, in case you would like to see more of what Ness creates, which is just absolutely stunning. She does amazing pieces. I will link the H&M little palette that I've used up there. The plastic one you can see on the side, the acrylic one, actually came with my paints. So I will link that. Interestingly, those paints also came with brushes. So I will link that set. It's really quite a good set. It was only around $100 delivered to my door. So very good deal for such beautiful paints and all those accessories as well. And it comes in a beautiful timber box. Okay, the seashell was a gift from one of my students, and then the linen is actually part of my collection. So I actually have a textile collection I've recently released. So you can find all of this information and all the links to these below your video, and you can find my website and all my socials. I would love to hear what you think. So I hope you've enjoyed painting this beautiful sunset with me today. And because this is my March bujo, this is my cover of my bullet journal for March, I did add an affirmation somewhere between heaven and earth. And I'm sure you'll agree that Mother Nature always gets it right, and that sunrises and sunsets are truly absolutely magnificent and absolutely have to be somewhere in between those two places. Thanks so much, everyone. See you soon.